Hey guys, GHAZZY TV here with another last Epoch build guide video, and in this one we're going to talk about a Skellymancer AUTOBOMBER. Not really sure what to call this one because it's a skeleton build that uses mage skeletons for your main source of damage output, using the new skill Profane Oblation to literally explode your other skeletons and other minions, which will summon other minions, which will summon other minions that the mage skeletons again are going to explode, and then they're going to summon other minions that the mage skeletons will explode. So this build is abusing or synergizing a ton of different mechanics that are together creating this, well-rounded beast, with a lack of better words. The build can be played in a life-based variant. It's going to be a little bit less tanky by doing so. However, what it does bring to the table is the possibility to literally cycle start with a character like this, as it doesn't really have any necessary required build enabling items. I will say this though, it is recommended to go low life, which means you're going to want to have the Exsanguinous chest piece, you're going to want to run the last steps of the living, and preferably the frostbite shackles if you can, or at least an experimental low life glove. That's going to give you the better defenses to start pushing 300, 400 corruption. However, unlike or other types of super meta builds right now, this build is not going to have the super high end damage to pull off 500-600 plus corruption. I think this build is going to pan out around 500 in really good gear. If you go really crazy with the gear, I'm pretty sure you could go up to 600, maybe even 650. But I think after that, you're going to start to struggle with a build like this when it comes to the corruption pushing. Again, do keep in mind that these are my guesstimates, my educated guesses, if you will, when it comes to corruption pushing. So if that's what you're looking for, this is not the build for you. However, if you're looking for a really cool summoner build that you can start with, having 0 unique items required to start the build off, a good transition into an actual comfortable way of scaling the build up into becoming better and better, and also most importantly, it's a really lazy build. As soon as I went low life, I was able to literally AFK arena monoliths. I've been able to just chill. I boosted friends by literally just standing still in the arena and just having a good time. It has been the thing all the way up to the corruption to 300. And honestly, the gameplay you're watching right now, the gear I have is very subpar, at least on the offensive scaling front. Defensive, it's okay. Still have a lot of improvements to be made. Anyways, let me go through the way this build actually works by checking out the gear, the idols, the blessings, and everything you'll need to know. So before we dive into the mechanics, because there's a little bit of tricks there to know, the gear I'm currently wearing is actually lacking an idol, I just noticed. I stole that on my other build. We're going to be running one of the large idols having a life, but most importantly, an applied mark for death and hit. This is something you don't need once your zombies have enough levels to start marking themselves. Therefore, you're only going to look for double HP or double HP with a ward retention large idols, and the stout idols will be double HP. And if you have the frostbite shackles, the suffix could be a cold resistance. So that's how the idols are set up. Blessings, we're going to go for void resistance. We're going to have lightning rest, crit avoidance, cold resistance, even more important with the frostbite shackles, and minion damage. So that's how those things are set up. So let's talk about the gear real quick before we go through the more tricky parts of this build. I am currently in a low life state, what I would refer to as the endgame version of this build, where we're actually using frostbite shackles. Best case scenario, you get a legendary potential to get the low life modifier. Can be a bit tricky. I haven't managed to get that yet. Henceforth, we have these gloves. However, you do want to have the legendary potential last steps of the living and get an actual experimental traversal mod in here. This is the only thing that stops you from going low life once you get these unique items. Luckily, the boots have a 50% drop rate, so getting one with a pair of legendary potential is not very hard. The problem is getting that little legendary potential to hit the traversal mod. So you would have to play life-based till you get these. Again, this build works without these items to get started, but these will be like the end game focus if you want to push this build. I am running an ambition of the raised acolyte. This is very helpful for the sustain of our defense, as we're going to be pumping up a lot of ward through a variety of mechanics. This is one of them. having something like minion damage, intelligence, even minion HP, even cold resistance with the gloves or life would be very beneficial. So all of those things would work very well on an item like this. The chest piece, best case scenario would be to have the base crit strike chance for your mage skeletons, which is insanely strong. I don't have that. However, I do have the intelligence. Belt wise, I would go for minion damage, minion HP. I would try to have one life modifier, preferably hybrid. And then last suffix, I would probably aim for crit avoidance. You don't need the zombie summoning. You might see in the gameplay footage how I sometimes peek up to 6 zombies. We don't need the belt to banish that. I'll go through that in a second. If you don't get crit avoidance on your belt, you can always use your other ring to do so, which I have. And in here, you want to have minion damage, minion HP, and intelligence. I tend to focus on minion damage and intelligence, but in the higher corruption, having minion life is going to be very important, and that's the brick wall that I'm about to hit as soon as I get to 350, 400 corruption. The gameplay footage is just above 300 corruption that you've been watching on, let's take a look, 320 corruption. And it started to notice some monsters starts killing them, and as you can see, I have tons of minion life that I'm lacking across the board. I'm not level 100, and we'll go through the tree in a bit. My amulet, probably the worst piece across the board on my gear right now. I have minion damage. That's literally the only thing benefiting me outside of the rest. Obviously, you'll want the turquoise amulet base, minion damage, minion HP, any sort of resistances. If you have option to get HP or cold rest, if you're capping elsewhere, that would be preferable with the gloves, and that's kind of it. The helmet, instead of having base crits, I would say that the shared crit for you and your minions would be better placed in your helmet, and having the base crit on your chest would be the best case scenario to make sure your mage skeletons have a 100% chance to crit. Outside of that, intelligence, HP, resistances, it's going to be the name of the game. Offhand, go for the opulent. It's going to give you a ton of extra defenses, minion damage, minion HP, any sort of lacking resistances. Weapon, go for a harvester because it gives your minions necrotic damage, and all of our abilities will be necrotic damage. The two only suffixes that can go on a harvester that you benefit from is minion spell and bow, mainly the spell damage, and then necrotic penetration for you and your minions. Prefixes really don't matter. You're not going to have any problems with mana either. And the last piece I want to talk about is the cycle of putrescence. Now, I have an LP1, actually pretty decent roll minion damage on it. This is a very common ring. People think that you need this to make this build work. That's not true. It does help a little bit. If you're lacking defenses or survival or resistances, replace this ring and play without it. You will thank me later. And then once you cover those stats elsewhere, you can slot the ring back in if you have it. Not mandatory. And before the mechanics, I'm going to talk about the tree real quick. We're going to have intelligence, necrotic rest, 1 point in mania, which gives us ward gain on nearby death. I tried maxing this out, not worth it. We need to put those points on minion health instead. We're also going to have the increased minion attack cast speed, specifically for the cast speed. Give a little bit of vitality, max out the ward retention, and give them some extra armor. Rest of the points is actually going into the necromancer tree. In here, we're going to max out the damage approach and the defenses for them. 1 point in the blood armor, and this mortal tether is literally our dump point. Once we're having everything else on the tree sorted, this is where every single point of your tree goes into. That's the point where I'm at, which will help the minions survive with the higher endgame content. 4 points in cursed blood. The 4th point is the last one you take before these. And then 4 points in minion shred armor. And then we're just going to take the generic minion stats here on the right hand side for necro. Cast speed, crit, HP for us, lower for the minions, vitality, minion resistances, flat damage, elemental rest and LE damage, necrotic damage. This node is so crazy. Crit multi for them, and then an extra scaly mage. And that sits together with the ward retention. Very simple. All right, so how does this build work then? To the nitty gritty. First off, we got Big Bob with 3 Bs, because I have 2 other minions named Bob. Anyways, this guy does nothing but just tank. Do not put your Dread Shade on him. Dread Shade is the ability that buffs your minions. The reason we don't want him there is because if there's an enemy up here in the corner, Bob here is going to run up there and attack them. Where do you think your mage skeletons are going to be? Or around here. They're ranged. You want Dread Shade to be on your ranged minions. That means your mage skeletons. So Bob is basically just here to be an aggro tank, and that's therefore we're speccing him to health and armor and a size for his threat generation and keeping him up and giving some armor granted nearby minions, speed and attack. Do not take the hunger node if you go low life. You can take this if you're life based, because this is going to make him hit life to you, and you don't want to have HP when you're going low life. Outside of this, the Dread Shade is very simple. We're going to make sure we have some AoE, take tallest targets. Make sure that we have some extra damage. AoE, the health decay is going to be prevented through this one. Maximum 1 shade, but no health drain. Make it affect you as well for some comfortability, extra damage scaling and whatnot. It's very generic. This is basically how most Minion Army Dread Shades are looking. So what about the Mage Skeletons then? Essentially, they are not going to be attacking. They're not going to be casting their own spells. So therefore, we don't care about extra projectiles. What we do care about is them having cast speed and crit. And therefore, we're going to max out base crit strike chance, crit multi, extra skeleton. We're going to get 1 point in here so we get access to the cast speed and also frenzy for even more cast speed. And the reason for this, and the extra flat damage, of course, is because of this little node. Profane Oblation is the change for 1.0. Previously, this was Sacrifice, which is a physical damage ability. And now, Profane Oblation is a necrotic skill. This means that scaling necrotic damage, they will scale the damage output of Profane Oblation. What this does is that it will make the Mage Skeletons explode Skeletal Warriors, Rogues, and Vanguards whenever they are close to an enemy, dealing a ton of damage. So this is how this build actually works. The Skeletons themselves, we are making sure we don't ever get any Archers. We do so by speccing into max Skeletons. And therefore, we are able to be in a position where we only summon melee Skeletons. They will run up to the enemy targets, and the Mage Skeletons will explode them. So therefore, we don't care about their HP, we don't care about their damage or anything like that. What we do care about is sustaining mana. So we're going to put in the most points in here for the mana efficiency, and then we're going to put in 3 points into Soul Catcher, which allows us to get a ward whenever they die, which is a lot. And then we're putting the 3 points Mind Catcher, and this is how we sustain mana so crazily. So we're going to get a ton of mana back all the time. 4 points into Immortal allows us to make sure that there's a 40% chance that whenever one of these skeletons gets exploded, they will just randomly be respawned within 3 seconds, allowing us to not need to spam the ability all the time and get tons of mana. So this is how this build is working. I have my Mage Skeletons out. I'll make sure they have a Dread Shade, and then I spawn some Skeletons. And I spec into the Maritap to get access to Empty the Graves, which allows me to spend a little bit more mana, but I only need to cast twice to summon all of my Skeletons. So I don't have to spam it on a boss target. I just check this little icon. Do I have 4 or 5 that I don't cast it? If it goes down, well, I'll click once. And I'll spend a little bit of mana, 27 mana. But 3 of them are going to die, and each of them dying is 15 mana back, plus any potential respawn. It's so crazy. You see the mana bar going crazy. That's not it, though. We're going to run zombies. This is why we have the Putrescence, to keep 1 zombie up at all times for endgame. Not necessary. However, we're not going to have this on our bar. Instead, we have an unspec transplant for mobility. Reason for this is to lower the mana cost, and then spec into the point where every time a zombie explodes on an enemy, we're getting tons of ward back. So how do we then summon them? Well, it's very simple. This little node right there makes it so that whenever any sort of minion that you have dies, including when your Mage Skeletons explode them, there's a 30% chance that you will cast the ability. This costs mana, though. Keep that in mind. That's why it's important with the mana sustain. So whenever you're low in mana, always prioritize casting Skeletons before summoning anything else. So 30% chance to just summon zombies. The zombies is not going to be exploded by your Skeletons, but they will suicide themselves and deal damage to enemies, giving you ward, giving enemies a mark for death, and most importantly, 16% kill threshold, and with this node, they are always summoning a Skeleton Vanguard. So the zombie dies, there's a 30% chance that that zombie gets summoned back. The ring itself will respawn a zombie, at least if you have 1, they will always get you 1 back. And the Skeleton Vanguard would then be exploded by the Mage Skeleton, which then has a 30% chance to also resummon another zombie. So it kind of loops around pretty goddamn well. So this is how this build is in my current gear, sometimes spiking up to 12, 13,000 ward. It's very comfortable to play. You shouldn't be entirely AFK. It's not entirely an auto-bomber per se, but the build is very lazy, extremely fun to play, and it works extremely well as a cycle starter and gets you up to a couple of 100 corruption very easily. And anything above that will require some pretty heavy investments into gear. The gear I have right now should bring me up to about 400 corruption, maybe even higher. I'm trying to push that on stream right now. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. But that kind of sums up the entire build. Do make sure that if you're watching this later than it's posted, there could be some changes in the build. So make sure you're always getting the updated information. Check the written guide in the descriptions below. We're keeping those guides updated at any given time. And they're all posted on my events. There's also a link to my guide hub in which you can check all the rest of my guides I post for last Epoch, but also for D4 and PoE. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Make sure you subscribe, comment for more content. I'll see you guys in the next one. Till then, as always, stay safe, keep rocking.